pretty hot, Jordan. After church got the message that I was preaching, I decided to take the Wednesday off. We're a little lopsided tonight. But I'm glad you guys are here. Barry is in California. He asked me last Wednesday, I like to dog him, and he asked me the day before, so I need to give him credit that he asked me a full week ago if I would preach tonight. So I'm super excited to get to preach and just excited to get to be here. Courtney's in Nashville with work, so pray for her. She's traveling back tomorrow just for safety with that. A couple of announcements. This upcoming Sunday is going to be the Couples Connect meeting at the bowling alley. We're going to bowl, and I'm going to meet everybody at 6:30 Sunday night. That will be this Sunday. Next Saturday, June 29th, is going to be the Men's Connect meeting at 9:30 at IHOP. And then the other announcement I had was that the ladies are working on planning a church yard sale for the first Saturday, I believe, in July. So get with Elisa. She's got all that info, and I'm sure she's been talking to some of the ladies about that as well to help out there. So let's just go ahead and open up in a word of prayer. If you guys will stand up, let's just open up with a word of prayer and get ready to worship. So let's pray. Dear God, thank you for just everything that you are, God. Tonight we come here for one purpose, and that's to lift up your name, God. We're not here to do anything else. We're not here to be seen. We're not here to play music or to speak some words, God, but we're here to lift up and glorify the name of Jesus, God. I pray tonight for every single person that's here, God, that you would just reach down and be whatever they need tonight, God. Whether it's a comforter, whether it's a provider, a healer, God, you know each and every individual need that's in this place tonight, God. And I thank you for being the God of the one, God. You left the 99 and came for the one. You are the God of the one. So tonight, in every single person's life, I pray that you would be that God for them tonight. Whatever we may need, God, we're all coming in here on different areas of life. Some of us have had great days, some of us have had bad days, some of us have had everything that could go wrong, God, but we're still here to lift up and worship your name tonight, God. I pray for the worship tonight that it would just be done in a way that exalts you, God. I pray that every song, every note, every beat that's done would be to glorify your name, God. Tonight I pray for the message that you've given me, God, that it would just go out the same way that you gave it to me, God. I pray just like you say that it will not return void, God. And I ask you tonight to just simply be in this place, God. We're asking you to come into our church tonight, God, and just be in this place, God. We need you here. We need your presence, God. We long for you in everything that we do, God. I pray for Barry as he's in California, God, for safety when he travels back home. I pray for Courtney in Nashville for safety, God. I pray for families that are hurting, that are not here, God, that you would just help them, God. I pray for Lynn, that you would just continue to restore her health, God. I pray for Pastor Herb, that you would continue to restore him, God. We are completely believing for ultimate healing and a complete miracle in his life, God, and in these lives. So we know that you are able, God. So tonight, in everything that we do, God, let us just slow down and just simply worship the name of Jesus. Let us forget about what we've got to do tomorrow, what we've got later tonight, what bad happened yesterday or what good happened yesterday, God. And right now, for this next hour, hour and a half, however long it may be, God, let us just worship you. Putting everything else aside, everything else behind us, God, and focusing solely on you, Jesus. And I pray tonight that every single one of us would do that, God. I pray for worship, God, for every single person. I pray for new levels of worship, God. I pray that we would just be free to worship you tonight in this place, God. I pray for anybody that needs anything, God, that they would understand that these altars are open the entire service from the very beginning to the very end, God, and that you will meet them there, that there will be people to meet them there to pray, God. And we thank you for everything you do and everything you're going to do through this service, and we lift up your name, Jesus. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Oh, we exalt thee.
Tonight to go down to kids' church. They are all excited and running and jumping to get there. But like I said, Barry, I like to rag him when he asks me the day before, so I need to give him credit if he's watching the live stream or when he does, because he asked me a full week in advance if I would preach tonight. So I was fully prepared and ready to go when the day came for once. It wasn't a day before thing. So I was thankful for that. Like I said, Courtney is in Nashville. She texted me earlier and said, we're going to a really expensive restaurant tonight. I said, yay, great. I love to hear it. I love when you go and do stuff like that. But she's having a good time, and she also said, I'm going to miss your message tonight. And I said, well, you know, there's always live stream, ... And so if she's watching, she'll hear me say it. If not, you guys can rag her for not watching it, not even listening to her own husband preach. If I can get her to listen, nobody will. But she's in Nashville. She'll be back tomorrow. We went, just a quick update for you guys. We went to the doctor last week. Everything is still growing good. Everything is looking the way that it's supposed to. The heartbeat was in the 140s and 150s. We didn't get through an ultrasound last time. I was sort of bummed about that. They don't do it every visit after 20 weeks, but we got to hear the heartbeat, and everything is going good. And it is getting closer and closer day by day to the world of parenthood that will be upon us. So if you have any spare time in your prayers, I can use all of the prayer I can get for that. I'm stocking up on naps this summer while I'm not teaching, because I know that that's going to be a thing of the past come September. So I'm enjoying life right now, and I know that we'll enjoy it, obviously, when Marley gets here as well. But tonight, I want to talk, and I want to preach to you guys from a scripture that is in John chapter 9. John chapter 9, and starting in verse 13 is where I want to start at tonight. I want to talk to you guys about this thought and this idea of faith for the after. Faith for the after. There's all sorts of Bible stories that we talk about all the time where people had to show faith before their miracle. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire had to show faith before God came into the fire with them. Sarah couldn't have a baby. She had to show faith for 90 years before God would give her a baby. David and Goliath, obviously David had to have faith to go up against the giant. They all had to have faith before their miracle. But as I was reading this story that's in John chapter 9, I think that something that we forget about a lot of times is that there also has to be faith for the after. Faith after the miracle, because how many of you guys know that once we finally do get our miracle, or once we do get our answered prayer, or once we do get the healing or the restoration or the salvation or whatever it might be, that doesn't mean the devil is just going to stop. If anything, that means that he's going to continue to press harder on us. And so in my opinion, and according to this scripture that I want to read you guys, there is some faith that is required for the after. So you've got your miracle, you've got your answered prayer, you've got everything that you've been asking for, but now, what am I supposed to do? So I want to read a scripture in John chapter 9, starting in verse 13. I'm going to read quite a few scriptures, so bear with me. John chapter 9, verse 13, it says, "And they brought the Pharisees to the man who had been blind." A little bit of context for you. In the beginning of chapter 9, there was a man that was blind. He was born blind. They brought him to Jesus, and Jesus took some mud and rubbed it on his eyes, and he was able to see. So verse 13 again, "They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was the Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. 'He put mud on my eyes,' the man replied, 'and I washed them, and now I see.' And some of the Pharisees said, 'This man is not of God, for he does not keep the Sabbath.'" If you know anything about the New Testament, you know that one of the primary things was that the Sabbath was completely and exclusively for rest. You don't do anything. You don't heal, you don't pray, you don't do any of these things on the Sabbath. So Jesus had healed this man of being blind on the Sabbath, and they were not happy with it. But it says, "But others asked, 'How can a sinner perform such signs?' So they were divided. Then they turned again to the blind man. 'What have you to say about him? It was your eyes that he opened.' And the man replied, 'He is a prophet.' They still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. 'Is this your son?' they asked. 'Is this the one you said was born blind? How is it that he can now see?'" So we're going to get into the rest of this story, but that's just sort of the context that's going on. So we have a man that was born blind that Jesus has healed, and the Pharisees are all divided about it. Some of them say, "Who is this guy that's performing miracles on the Sabbath?" Some of them say, "He's a sinner. Why is he doing this?" They're divided, and they say, "Well, let's just ask the guy that was blind and can now see." They said, "Hey, you were the one that he opened your eyes. You were blind. Now you can see, what do you say that he is? What do you have to say about him? And the blind man that could now see said, he is a prophet. He has to be a prophet. He opened my eyes. And they still didn't believe him, so they call for his parents. And it says they called for the man's parents. So we don't get his age, but it doesn't say the boy, it doesn't say the young boy, it says the man. So this is a grown man that they call for his parents. And they say in verse 19, is this your son? They ask, is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that he can now see? Verse 20, we know he is our son, the parents answered, and we know that he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He can speak for himself. Don't you hate when your parents say that? They talk for them. Like, I want mom and dad to talk for me as long as they will. He is of age. He can speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be kicked out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, he is of age, ask him. A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. So they're giving him a second chance. Hey, you need to tell the truth. We know he is a sinner. He's performing miracles on the Sabbath. Verse 25, he replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing that I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Then they asked him, what did he do to you, and how did he open your eyes? He answered, I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they hurled insults at him and said, you are this man's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. Verse 29, we know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this man, we don't even know where he comes from. The man answered, now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. To this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. If you were hoping for a happy ending, that was not it. They kicked him out of the synagogue. So this was a man, again, who was born blind. He was born without the ability to see, and all of a sudden he has this encounter with Jesus. Jesus takes some mud, rubs it on his eyes, and he is now able to see. And so I told you guys that I want to preach on this idea of faith for the after. Faith for the after. So the very start of this story is where we see this man getting his miracle. He was blind, but now he can see. So he's gotten his miracle, and now what does the rest of this look like? What types of faith does he have to show? And there's a couple of things that I want to point out to you guys really quick, according to this scripture, that faith for the after requires. And so if we go back to verses 20 through 22, it says this. It says, we know, this is the parents talking. We know he is our son, the parents answered, and we know that he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be kicked out of the synagogue. The first thing in faith for the after is sometimes that faith for the after may require you to stand alone. If anybody should have your back, if anybody I feel like in the natural life should have your back, it's your parents. Your parents should have your back, and I know that not everybody has that situation, but I've been blessed to always know that if anything went down and I wasn't just deliberately in the wrong, which I have also been that before, believe it or not, that my parents would have my back. But these parents here, they say, hey, we know, all that we know is he's our son. We don't know how he got healed. We don't know who did it. We don't know what happened. Ask him. He's old enough. He can talk for himself. And it says that they said this because they were afraid to be kicked out of the synagogue. So faith sometimes might require you to stand alone. And that's not like a happy ending, go out of here feeling great type of point, but it's the reality of it. Is sometimes when we have to stand on our faith, we're going to be standing alone. That's just the harsh reality of it, is that we might not have our parents with us, we might not have our spouse with us, we might not have even any of the other church members with us, but there's always going to be somebody that's with you, and that is God. We're never truly alone. We might be alone in the natural, but God is standing with this man. He's in a situation where the Pharisees have him held here, and they're talking to the parents and like, hey, you're his parents. Give us the answer. What happened? How did this man be able to see? What happened? And they said, we don't have any idea. They chickened out. How many people do you know that thought had your back, and as soon as times got hard, they chickened out of their faith with you? I'm praying for you. I'm there for you. I'll be there for you. And then something happens, and they face a little bit of criticism for being there for you, and then just like that, they're gone. They're out. Sometimes faith requires us to stand alone. That's not like a great, positive, uplifting thing, but it's the reality of it, guys. This man had just gotten the greatest miracle of his life. Would you not think that his parents would be going around the streets telling everybody, I don't know who this man is, but he just took my son's eyes and opened them. But instead, they're keeping it hush-hush because they're afraid for their own lives. Faith sometimes, just like we see with the blind man here, is going to require us to stand alone. I can think back time and again in my life when things have happened, especially when I was in high school and when I was in college, that when I made, and I don't want you to get the wrong idea that I was a perfect person in high school and college, because I wasn't. I definitely wasn't. But there were times when I made stands and said, I'm not going to do this. You guys can go there after the game on Friday night, but I'm not going to. You guys can do this, but I'm not going to. You guys can do that. And there were times when I lost some friends. There were times when some friends laughed at me. Some friends joked about me. And guys, that's just the reality of it. Because at some point, you've got to decide that my faith is something that's worth standing for, even if I'm going to stand alone. Even if it requires me to not be a part of the dirty jokes at work, or send forward those dirty emails that are funny or whatever else. Even if it requires me to stop and say, hey, this is where I stand, and I'm not going any further. I talk downstairs with the youth all the time. We have a nice carpet border, and I talk to them all the time about how we have to establish what our zone is and say, I'm not willing to step outside of this. This is my boundary, this is my faith, and I don't care if I lose friends, I don't care if I lose boyfriends, girlfriends, church members, youth group members, or whatever, but I am not going to cross this line. And these parents were not willing to do that. They said, we'll cross the line as long as we can keep safety in the synagogue and you won't kick us out. They were not willing to say, hey, this was our son that was blind and he can now see. Let me go tell the world. They said, no, we're not sure what happened to him. Ask him. He's old enough. Sometimes faith requires you to stand alone. That's not a great thing, but it's the reality of what it is. The second thing is that faith requires you to speak up. There is nothing more frustrating than somebody that whispers. I have a funny story to tell you about this. A couple of years ago, me and Taylor and Jordan, this was like our first trip that our parents let us go on, just us three. And we thought we were the coolest. I mean, we thought we rented the hotel on our own. We thought we were big stuff. I got tickets to a football game for Christmas, and we went to this football game in Birmingham, Alabama. And so we get to our hotel room. Taylor or Jordan one, I don't remember which one it was. They bring their PlayStation, and me and Taylor are playing PlayStation. And Jordan at the time has a girlfriend, and you guys know how it is when you're 13, 14, 15, you have a girlfriend, you got to talk for 8 hours a night, and you fall asleep with each other on the phone and wake up and say good morning the next morning, and you have to do all this stuff. And so me and Taylor are sitting on the edge of the bed. We got the two beds. We're sitting on the edge playing the PlayStation, and Jordan's laid back on the bed, and all you can hear from the front of the bed is, and we turn around, and he's on the phone. And I'm like, Jordan, who is that? And he says, his girlfriend's name. He said, it's her. And I said, why don't you speak up? She can't hear you. It's going to be okay if we hear your conversation, but there's nothing worse than a whisperer. These people that cannot talk. And this man here is put in a position where he has a choice to make. Because he can either whisper about what God's done for him, or he can speak up and shout it out. And we hear it in this story, but let me tell you that the same exact thing is true in your life, is that every time God does something for you, you have the choice. Am I going to whisper about this answered prayer? and tell a couple of people at church? Am I gonna whisper about this one and tell, my pastor, look what God did for me? Or is it gonna be worthy of a Facebook post? That's when we're shouting it out. Is it really gonna be a big one for me? Am I gonna tell everybody that I come into contact with, guess what God did for me? When is the last time that we truthfully got so excited that God did something that we called and said, you're never going to believe what just happened. You will never believe what God just did. He did this. When is the last time? And it's a shame that it takes so long for us. It's a shame that things have to be so bad before we'll speak up and shout out what God has done for us. I remember the day that I got saved. I was over actually at Mama and Papa's house, and we were watching a movie. And I got saved, and Mom and Dad was birthday shopping for Taylor. And I prayed with Papa, and I was like, I've got to call Mom and Dad. And I didn't have a cell phone at the time, so I borrowed theirs. I got to tell somebody. When is the last time that we were so excited for what God did that we're like, I have to tell somebody. I've got to tell somebody. This man speaks up in verse 25. He says, he replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. But here's one thing that I do know. I was blind, but now I see. He looks up and says, hey, guys, I don't know all the legal rules. I don't know about Sabbath, not Sabbath. I don't know about sinner, not sinner. I don't know if he's the Messiah. I don't even really know his name. Here's all I know, is that I woke up this morning not being able to see, and I'm going to go to bed being able to see. That's all. I can't give you all of the details. I can't give you all the exacts. I can't quote the entire Old Testament to you. I can't tell you the theology of this. All I know is he did this for me, and I'm not going to be quiet about it. When is the last time that we were at that level for what God did for us? Faith requires us to speak up. If we know anything, we know that we are living in a world now more than ever that needs something to cling to. We're looking for anything. Whether it's Facebook likes or Instagram likes or boyfriends or husbands or jobs or cars, or everybody's looking for something to cling to. Why not speak up and give them Jesus to cling to? People are looking for something. They're looking for hope. They're looking for answers. And we have it. And we're not sharing it. Everybody hates that. Back in school again, everybody hates that person that knows every single answer to the test, but they're not going to share their study guide with anybody. Guys, we have the answers. We know what it is. We know who to turn to. We know what he does, and we're keeping it revealed. Why? Because we're afraid that we might have to stand alone. Because we're afraid that if I step out and say, this is where I stand, this is what he's done for me, this is what he continues to do for me, this is what he's done for me for 30 years, this is what he's done for me every single day, we're afraid that we might get a little bit of kickback and face some criticism from our coworkers, from our classmates, from our teammates, from our spouse. And so we keep it on the down low when Jesus is saying, hey, look what I've done for you. Why would you not want to go tell the world? Why would you not? Why do you want to keep it such a secret? Why are we trying so hard to conceal and hide our faith? Because nobody else in the world is trying to hide anything else anymore. But all we try to do is hide our faith and say, well, let me just stay down here. Let me just keep it to myself. Let me just go to church. If the service is really good, I'll post about it on Facebook. If it's not, oh well, I'll see you guys Wednesday night if I don't get too busy. Probably like next Sunday morning though. Now, why do we have a faith level that's there when everybody else in the world is certainly not quiet about what they believe and what they do? And am I saying that it should be just like a shouting match? No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that faith requires us to speak up, guys. Tell people. Tell your coworkers. Tell your classmates. Tell your friends. Tell your husbands. Tell them about the answered prayers. Tell them about the miracles. Tell them about all the things that have happened. This man spoke up and he says, look, I don't know everything, but all I know is I was blind and I can now see. Verse 26 says, and they ask him, what did he do? How did he open your eyes? And then he starts to get a little bit attitudey with him in verse 27. He says, look, I've told you already, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Are you wanting to become his disciples too? He's like, how many times do I have to tell you I was blind, but now I see? I don't know everything that happened, but here's what I know is I couldn't see, and now I can. Why do you want to keep hearing this story? Do you want to follow him too? Is what he's saying. He spoke up about what he believed in. Faith will require you to speak up at some point in your life. And if you've never got there, you will at some point, where you've got to make a decision. Am I going to keep quiet, or am I going to speak up and say, this is where I stand and I'm not moving? And maybe it's already happened for you, and maybe you feel like, I missed it. I stayed quiet. There's going to be plenty of other chances, I promise you. Anybody that's lived long enough knows that there will be multiple times for you to speak up on your faith. The next thing, the third thing, it says in verse 34, to this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they kicked him out of the synagogue. Again, not a happy ending for this. This isn't like, and they all went off singing Hosanna together. Like, this isn't how that story ends. They throw the man out of the synagogue. He gets kicked out. And so, for me, it would have been super easy to just say, all right, I quit. I give up. I've stood alone. I've spoken up. I've done everything that I know to do, and I just got kicked out of church. What am I supposed to do now? It would have been so easy to quit. And I think that so many of Christians are at that exact same spot. Is that it would be so much easier to quit than it would be to just keep going. It would be so much easier to quit waking up early on Sunday morning and coming to church. It would be so much easier on Wednesday night to have a little bit of family time. It would be so much easier to sleep 15 extra minutes in the morning and skip that devotional. It would be so much easier to just quit. And we're there. We're living life on a spot where it would be so much easier to quit. And that has to be where this man, his natural mind was. He's done everything right. He came to Jesus. He got healed. He stood on his faith. He spoke up about it, and he gets kicked out of the synagogue. How easy would it have been to quit? But most of you know this, and a lot of you, if you haven't lived it yet, you will. You know that sometimes faith is going to require you to not give up. If I were to ask you to raise your hand, how many of you have thought about giving up, I would just about bet that most of us would raise our hand and say, I've thought about it. It's hard. It's hard living a dedicated life. It's hard. There are times that are challenging. There are times that are tough. There are times when I feel like I'm standing alone. There are times when I feel like I'm speaking up and no one's listening. There are times when I feel like I'm doing everything right and I get kicked out. I get kicked out of my friend group. I get kicked out of my coworker crew that hangs out at lunch. I get kicked out of this. I get kicked out of that. I'm not the popular one in the youth group. I'm not the popular one on the team. I'm not the popular one in class. I'm doing everything right. What am I supposed to do? Not give up. That's all I can tell you. Just like the man that was blind and then can now see, I don't have all of the answers. I don't claim to know everything that book says. But if there's one thing I know, it's that when this thing ends, guys, we are on the winning side of this. When this thing ends, we win. It's hard. I'm not telling you that the Christian life is always going to be easy and perfect and just walking through life without ever any hurdles, because that's not true. It's hard. It's difficult. The devil comes at you. Here's the sad part about it, is a lot of times he comes at you through the closest people to you. And that's why it hurts so bad. But here's what I do know. Is that the Bible does say that I know the plans that I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Romans 8:28 says that all things work together. We know these things. We know how the story ends, guys. We win the battle. So as hard as it gets, as tough as it seems, what I want to encourage you with tonight is that faith requires you to not give up. Faith for the after. This man had received his miracle. He had gotten his miracle, and it would have been so easy for him to just go sit back in his house and hide and never say a word, because he was blind. He's got what he needs, but he stands up, and he stood alone. His parents didn't even have his back. They chickened out. They cowered out of the situation. They said, hey, we don't have any idea We don't know. Talk to him. He's a grown man. Because they were scared. Faith's going to require you to stand alone sometimes. Faith is going to require you to say, this is me. This is where I am. I don't care if my husband stands with me. I don't care if my wife. I don't care if the youth group stands with me. I don't care if the worship team stands. We are not doing this. I know that this is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm going to stand here even if I have to stand alone. And that's where the boy was. And then he spoke up. And he said, look, I don't know all the answers. I don't know everything, but what I do know is I was blind, but I can now see. When is the last time that you got so excited for what God did in your life that you truthfully spoke up and said, guys, listen to this? Because I can guarantee you, for me, I'm a lot more likely to go to school and talk to my coworkers or talk to my students or talk to whoever and say, did you see the game last night? That's me. Did you see the finals last week? KD got hurt, Klay Thompson's hurt, they're all out, the Warriors are never going to be good again, it's awful. Did you see that? Did you see the Braves are on fire right now? Did you see, I can talk those things to you. But when's the last time that I came in on a Wednesday night or on a Sunday morning and I say, God, Kim and Curtis, you're never going to believe what God did for me and Courtney this week. No, well, let me tell you what God did on Tuesday for me. Allison, you'll never believe it. When is the last time that we came in fired up, full of it, ready to go because of something that God had done in our lives? And we're in one of two categories there. Either we're not bold enough to say what God has done in our lives, or here's the second thing, is God might not be doing things in your life because you're not asking Him to do things in your life. There's a whole other level that we can get into for another 30 minutes there, but I'll spare you. I'm not going to close 8 times like Barry. Okay, I'm just going to give you one. All right? If he's watching, I love you. But that's the reality of it, is that there has to be a point in your life when you say, this is what God has done for me, and I'm going to shout it from the mountaintops. I'm going to tell everybody. I'm going to share it, and I'm going to let everybody know. And then the third thing is that faith for the actor requires you to not give up, guys. As the worship team comes up and gets ready to play, I just want to challenge you guys with these 3 simple things. Sometimes faith requires you to stand alone. Faith always requires you to speak up. I challenge you. I love to give the youth a challenge on that. I challenge you before Sunday morning to find somebody and tell them about something God has done in your life. Whether it's a coworker, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's a church member on Sunday morning, I challenge you to find somebody and say, guess what God did just this week? Because we can go on and on and on. I was thinking today, one of the great things about summer, again, is obviously I don't work, so I get a lot of time at home to watch TV and take naps. And I was thinking today, I was just, Courtney's out of town, I didn't have a lot to do. I'd already done all of the work at the house. I did the dishes, I swept mop, Courtney, you're welcome. I did all of those things. And I was just sitting there, and I began to think about my life. And I was like, not to sound conceited or arrogant, but I truthfully don't know if there is one thing that I don't have that I feel like I want. Everything that I desired, I have. I have an incredible wife. We're about to have a baby. We're going to be parents. I have an incredible family. I have my dream job. And it allows me to also get to have a dream job here and work with some incredible youth. We have a nice house. We have cars that get us from A to B and do the job. Literally, I was thinking, I was like, God, I don't, if I could ask for anything, I don't know what I would truthfully say, because everything that I've ever wanted, you have given me. When I look back on my life, when I was 14 and 15, these things that I'm living out now were my goals. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a baseball coach. I wanted to be a youth pastor. I wanted to get married to Courtney at 15. I wanted to have a kid one day. I wanted these things. And I was sitting and looking at him like, God, you've done it all. You've done all of these things for me. the least I can do is stand up when you ask me to. Speak out. Tell people what you've done. And not give up. Because even though God has blessed me, there's hard days. There's days where we worry about things. There's days where we struggle. There's days where we fear the future of that is parenthood. There's days when I get scared of, and is accepting this head baseball job going to put too much on me with a new baby and with the youth group and with teaching. There's days that I worry about these things. But what I also know is that He's been there every step of the way, and He's not going anywhere now. And I'm only 25 years old, so I know that some of you have way more experience than me. You take that how you will. Have way more experience than me in knowing that God is faithful. Every single step of the way, He walks with me. He holds my hand and He guides me. He directs me and says, no, don't go over there. I want you right here. When I've tried to do things on my own, no, I don't want you at that church. I want you right here. I don't want you at that school that you applied to and trying to get a job before you got married so that would be secure. I want you to wait out until August and I've got a job for you to do. I don't want you to go to that school. I want you right here in town. I don't want you to go this way. I want you right here. He's been there every step of the way. He's performed miracle after miracle after miracle in my life. And maybe I wasn't blind and I can now see. Maybe I wasn't lame and I can now walk. Maybe I wasn't deaf and I can now hear, but I was lost and I am now found. I was astray and now I'm on the path. Because He's been there every step of the way. So the least thing that I can do is stand up for my faith. Speak out for my faith. And never, ever give up. As many days as it would be easy to sleep in and not come and not pray and not read, guys, I want to challenge you to never give up. Keep pressing on. Keep pressing on. Paul said, I have fought the good fight. I have kept the faith. I have finished the race. What an honor at the end of your life to be able to say that. I have fought the good fight. I have kept the faith and I have finished my race. The only way we can finish our race is if we never give up. Keep going. Keep going. Stand up. Speak out. Never quit. He's done it for you, so let's return the favor and do it for Him. As we stand and as they get ready to sing, with every head bowed and eye closed, maybe you're here and you're like, Jake, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're preaching, and I like it. But I don't know about this faith. I don't have this faith. I'm not at that level. I don't have that faith. If that is you, can I tell you guys that there's only one way to get it. There's not a million different tricks, and again, I don't claim to know everything. But what I do know is the way to that faith and the way to that path and the way to that salvation only goes through Jesus Christ. There is no other way. There's not come to church for 10 years straight. There's not read and memorize all the Bible. There's not tithe everything you have. There's one way. And that's by putting your faith in Jesus Christ. And so if there would be anybody here that would just say, I've never made that declaration. I've never made that decision. I've never asked God into my heart. I've never put my faith fully in Him. I never want to have a church service without trying to do that. If there's anybody that would say that, just really quick, just raise your hand. Maybe you're here and you say, Jake, I hear the faith, I know Jesus, but it's hard. It's tough. My friends laugh at me. My coworkers make fun of me. My boyfriend and girlfriend, they don't understand why I draw this line. They don't understand why I say, this is where I stand. If that's you, and you would just admit that sometimes faith gets hard. If that's you, just really quick, raise your hand so I can pray for you. See your hand. And then finally, maybe you're here and you say, I'm ready to quit. I'm ready to give up. I've done this thing. I've came to church. I've brought my family to church. And nothing is working. I'm getting kicked out, just like the blind man did. If you're at that point, that you would be completely honest and say, I'm ready to quit. If there's anybody, just really quick. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this message, God. I pray for the hands that went up, God, the hands that just said, hey, faith is hard. God, I pray that we would realize that we're not alone in raising our hand, and every single one of us could raise our hand and say, sometimes it's hard. But God, I pray that on the hard days, in the challenging times, in the tough weeks, in the bad reports, that we would remember that you are with us. That we would remember that even when it feels like we're walking alone, we don't have any support, we don't have anybody by our side, God, that you are right there every single